there's a judge in the United States that actually took the side of a gun owner that also likes to partake in a popular plant used for recreational or even medicinal purposes in the United States. And because of this, I wanted to kind of do a PSA, almost a follow-up to my last year's video on the same exact topic. But I don't want you to view this win as a win necessarily for yourself. I will explain all of that and I'll give you the details surrounding this, because along with everything else that gun owners have to consider and kind of worry about, if you will, from the gun you carry, should you have it on you at this particular moment? Does that little sign mean you can't carry? Should you ignore the sign? There's a whole host of different things we have to consider as a gun owner. This is one more, but this is one that could actually get your rights stripped away from you. Now, as I share my opinions, they will be strong. I know that you guys feel very strongly about this subject too. That's okay. Whether you agree or disagree, let me know what you think down below. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So a Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals judge down in Texas actually ruled in favor of a gun owner. This case is U.S. versus Gill. And Judge David Brones essentially threw out this charge against the man. Now, he was actually caught with multiple bags of this substance in his home, but he said, hey, look, you guys couldn't prove that he was under the influence of this at the time of his arrest, even though he had guns in his home or in his possession as well. Now, police were called to Gill's house over a disturbance with a firearm, and that's when police actually found 2 large bags of this along with multiple guns, as they put it. So they sentenced him to like 35 months, and then he actually filed the appeals on constitutional grounds. Now, one of the landmark cases that we've had in recent years was in 2022, the Bruen case, where the Supreme Court said that anytime you're making a judgment about people's constitutional right and firearms, you have to compare that throughout the history of the United States as well. Meaning, is there evidence that we've disarmed people because of past use of particular substances? And in this case, the judge found no. Just because you are a user doesn't necessarily mean that you should have your rights stripped away. And that part of it I agree with. Now, the same Court of Appeals actually handled a case last year as well and came to the same conclusion. Actually, it was an El Paso man, another El Paso man, or El Paso woman. Either way, it was U.S. versus Paola, and they found the same exact thing. And essentially what they said is, you can't prove that he was under the influence at the time of the arrest. Even though he admitted to being a daily user, that doesn't mean that he was actually actively under the influence at the time of the disturbance. Now, of course, just like in South Carolina, right, in other states too, you can walk into a bar with a loaded firearm, as long as you're carrying it concealed, of course. You can't actively drink while you're in the bar carrying your firearm. And of course, that's kind of where the gray starts to blend in with this kind of black and white issue, or some people see it as black and white. Now, it amazes me how many people don't actually know that you cannot be a user of this technically according to your 4473, which is that form, the NICS background check that you fill out whenever you go to purchase a firearm. They specifically mention this substance right on the 4473. And whether you are an unlawful or lawful user, they've updated it by the way, technically you can't be in possession of a firearm at all. Remember, the federal government, even though they're trying to reclassify this and get it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, they still have not done that, by the way. And it's also still federally regulated. So even though the DEA and the federal government kind of respect states' decisions on this topic, it still is against the law on a federal level. So if you are a gun owner and a user, no matter if it's medically justified or not, technically you can't be in possession of both. And the medical part of that I have a real problem with, because we've seen medical improvements. We've seen that there are certain medical benefits from this, and the government still doesn't recognize that, hence the reason that it's still a Schedule 1. So that kind of bothers me. It's almost like you're choosing whether I can actually have this to ease or maybe even cure my symptoms, whatever those symptoms may be. We're not going to get into that because I'm not somebody that's an expert in the medical field, but all we know is that there are benefits, and now you're making people choose between taking care of themselves and their right to protect themselves. I could throw 100 different examples of people and situations where this is totally unacceptable, but it is something you have to consider as a gun owner. Here's the other part of it too. You have to consider your state of mind if you ever had to fire your firearm. Now, up to this point, as you can see, I'm somebody that believes in freedom, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I believe in your right to do what you think is best for you and your family, and I think the government's role should not be telling you what you should do in your personal home. Now, that doesn't mean that you have the right to put other people in danger, and that's where I believe the line is. Just like with alcohol, I'm not a huge fan, I'm not a drinker, but that doesn't mean I don't think other people can't do that as long as they're responsible, and I feel the same way about this. There should be nobody in the government telling you that you can or cannot do this, but if your state of mind is actually changed and there's a situation where you then have to use your gun in self-defense, this creates one of those situations that you may not want to find yourself in. But I can say with a certain degree of certainty that you run the same risk with people and alcohol and firearms and what kind of danger that presents, maybe even more so, probably more so than what you run into with the other one. Point is, just like with everything firearms related, you got to know the laws first of all, because like I said, there's so many people that don't know about this, even though you answer that question every time you go to buy a firearm, and most people just kind of skim right over it. They have no clue that this actually is in direct contrast to you. No matter what state you're in, and no matter how your state views the medicinal purposes or recreational, being a firearm owner and a user, medically or otherwise, does not line up, and you could find yourself serving some serious time for doing just what this guy did. And maybe you don't have a judge that looks at it with this degree of constitutionality in mind, right? Or he doesn't look at it, the Second Amendment, as favorable, right? We just seen Hunter Biden go through this same exact thing, and of course he got convicted. We all seen how that went. Regardless though, you're not Biden, and you probably don't have those connects, and neither do I, so you got to be really careful with this stuff. Keeping a clear mind and a clear head is always the best route. But again, nobody should be able to tell you what you can or cannot do inside of your home, especially under direction of a doctor, and almost see it as a way of the government trying to disarm people because they're making them choose between medical help, something medically necessary, and your right to protect yourself. I do not agree with that at all. So until this is reversed on a federal level, I don't see this changing anytime soon. It really is going to depend. If you get caught in this situation, it's going to depend on if you go through the appeals process and then how that judge views the Second Amendment. Fortunately, with that 2022 Bruin case though, we have a little bit more leg to stand on, but that's not always guaranteed. So there you go. That's my opinion on this whole situation, man. Got to be really careful. Big thanks to you guys, and of course I want to hear your opinion. I know you will share it just like you did in the first video. Let me know what you think down below. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. See you in the next one, and as always, hold it down.